Hello, everybody, and welcome to Cactus Poetry Podcast. This is Sanyam, your host. Thank you so much for tuning in. Today, we have a very special guest with us. This this is a guy that I admire a lot. This is a guy who's written this beautiful book. It's called "Don't Believe Everything You Think," right? And of course, by that, we're talking about the great Joseph Nguyen. Hey, Joseph, how are you?
I'm good, Sam. Thank you so much for having me. I'm very, very excited.
Thank you so much for coming on, man. I mean, it is genuinely an honor to have you here.
Yeah, likewise. And it's always an honor to be able to, share some of these things with just wonderful souls like you and anyone who's kind of on the journey to discovering themselves, healing, just really looking beyond or for something more than just the typical day-to-day life, like looking for truth, really. And so it's always an honor to meet someone else on a very similar journey.
Likewise, man. I mean, I guess the right thing to do now would be to start with the intro, right? But I know for a fact that you're not a huge fan of introducing yourself, so I've spiced it up a little bit, let's say, right? I've a specific question that I'll be asking you. But before that, do you mind telling me why you're not a huge fan of introductions?
So I always find introductions very funny just because in introductions, you usually talk about what you did, your accomplishments, all the cool things that
Right,
people normally pay attention to. I don't really care much for a lot of those things, like how many books I've sold or how big it's grown or how many languages it's being translated to. Those are all great and I'm very grateful for them, but it it takes away from the message of what I want to bring, and also it takes away from just the person who's listening as well. Usually whoever listens, especially when I'm listening as a person that listens to other podcasts, whenever someone says a lot of their accomplishments, their introductions, I immediately think, oh, I want to be just like them. And so it
right.
creates this almost hierarchy of they're above me, I'm below, or I want to get to where they are, they're so far ahead. But that doesn't necessarily matter to me. And I think we all are on this, we all equal. We're all on different parts of our journey, but they're all equal in the same. And so with that, I always, if I introduce myself, if I tell my story, who I am, what I always preface it with is to not really listen to what I'm saying, but to pay attention to how you feel when I'm saying those things and when I'm sharing my story, because it's really more a reflection of you than anything else. And that's what I want to bring the attention to is um, just you and the truth that you can see and how you can find more peace, love, and joy in your life versus like what I've done. Because I just don't want to create that kind of dichotomy.
Right, but do you reckon there is an element of credibility that is attached to your introduction as well? For example, if I am, listening to a podcast, let's say, right, and if a person comes on and he talks about his accomplishments, do you reckon I'd probably listen to them a little bit more? Although I should not, I completely agree to that. But I probably, pay a little bit more attention if I knew what are the laurels which are associated with their name.
Yeah.
And I think you have a lot of them. And I think I'd understand if I'm not a huge fan of introductions because I've not really accomplished a lot yet. But you are obviously not me. So, I mean, I just feel like there's a level of credibility maybe that is also associated with
Yeah.
introductions, isn't it?
I think there is, and of course that's going to be a huge part in how society views us. What's interesting is I had zero credibility when I wrote the book, and now it's spread to all over the world. And
Right.
that's just very interesting to me when I had no background, no college degree, like absolutely nothing. There's no major business that I ran or anything like that. I'm just a regular person. And I think that interestingly enough adds to my credibility, the fact that I don't have credibility. So there's that paradox there, and that which means anyone can do it because I am a nobody. I'm just a regular person, and I've just been able to experience a lot more peace in my life when I'm able to just observe what I'm thinking and be able to let go of it. So, and what I do instead of, I think there's like a level of credibility with someone's accomplishments, but when you start to like look beyond that stuff, the external, because usually accomplishments are external, things that are external usually make us feel empty because They just come and go, but they're not really who we are. And so what I usually do now is I look at how I feel when someone is talking. I pay more attention to the energy and emotion versus what they're saying. I don't really care about what they say anymore. Um, and
Right.
so if they make me feel expansive, alive, inspired, then I tune in some more. Um, and that's very interesting to me because what I noticed was in my coaching calls when I used to coach a lot, I realized that it's not even what I say that matters. It's the place that I come from. So it's because the truth it can't be explained. The truth, for example, if I'm saying the word apple, right? The word
Right.
apple can never be an apple. It's a vocal noise. And, and the
Right.
word apple can only point to an apple, but it can never be an actual apple. So
Right. All
that's
right.
how I view words and accomplishments and all of those things is that it just points to the truth, but can never be the truth. And so what I do is I just bypass all of that and just look at what is the truth here and what am I feeling from that? And so I really remove the noise. And so when I do that in coaching calls, a lot of times it doesn't even matter what I'm saying. And 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 I start to notice that the more that I'm present, the more I let go of my thinking, the more peace that the other person is able to experience as well. And sometimes I say nothing on coaching calls, and that's the most transformative thing that I can do. And so I've kind of seen enough and experienced enough to know that it's not even my words sometimes that affects other people, but it's really the energy. And so that's what I pay attention to. Because if you walk into a coffee shop, you can look at people, not judging them, but just look and sense what the energy is. You can
Right.
sense if a person is very stressed. You can sense if a person is very happy. You can sense if there might be danger without even words, without them telling you. And so that's
Right.
really what I look at. Um, and so that's very interesting to me and why I can like almost bypass credibility and pay more attention to something that's a little more closer to the truth.
And I guess there is a certain level of survivorship bias that is also there when it comes to, credibility per se or accomplishments, right? And that also kind of negates the value of it at times, right? Now, jumping onto the question that I wanted to ask you for the introduction part without actually asking you to introduce yourself. So this is going to be an interesting, this is going to be an interesting question or a very stupid question. You will be the one who's going to decide that. But all right, the question is, if there's a person out there, right, and I give them a list, and that list entails every material belonging that you have, right, and even your physical attributes as well, right? What kind of person would they assume you are, given that even the list contains the material, what do you call it, possessions? They are ranked on the basis of this is the most important thing and this is the least important thing, right? This is basically from a completely superficial point of view, what kind of person does uh, Joseph perceived to be, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. So would that mean I would rank it right now, just like in my head, like those material possessions?
Right. Do you
So
mind? Yeah,
yeah, let's see. I'll just list off some of the top ones, I guess.
yeah,
And
brief.
is it ranked on what's most important to me or what?
Sorry, it's ranked on the basis of what is the most important to you,
Oh,
and
okay.
what is the least important to you. Then, yeah,
Oh, I like that question. I would say, firstly, that I wouldn't even care what is on that list, to be honest. Um, I can't really think of much other than like maybe my camera here. Um, like that's probably one of the more expensive things that I own that I just bought recently for YouTube
right,
and things like that. But if that disappeared tomorrow, I'd be okay with it too.
right,
I would say some of the material possessions that I do have is, for example, like my car that's like really nice, the camera, this laptop is also very nice. Like my desk, this home. Uh, my plants, those are pretty important to me. Like you can see the plants up there.
right, right. Yes,
And
beautiful.
so But when I'm kind of ranking those things, it doesn't really matter to me. And I even said this before to some people too, where the book's pretty successful now, and I've been able to make a really good income off of it. But
Right.
if all of that was taken away from me tomorrow, I'd be okay with that too. Um, just because I know that I don't really put a lot of my value in those things. And because of that, I know I can get it again, but also know I'm okay without it. Um,
Right. I think that's a very empowering position to be in, isn't it? It's a very
yeah,
powerful position to be in that you tomorrow you could do everything you have and then still be okay with it.
yeah. I mean, it would be terrible, right? It would, it
Yeah, I
would
get
be
it. Yes,
that's
obviously, yes.
devastating. I'd get
I
sad,
think the
but
key is not to think about it, isn't it?
yeah, yeah. So yeah, like for example, I have my Tesla Model 3 that I got recently, which is like my dream car from way,
Right,
way, way back. But if that was taken away from me, I'd be okay with that too. It's nice, and like I even feel a little bit what do you call it? Embarrassed to even say that I own something like that, because I'm a little bit more of, if people call me that, like a spiritual person. But
right.
it's something that was really interesting to me, and I really enjoy it. And now I'm just having fun with it. But again, if it was gone, I'd be okay with that too.
Right.
Um,
I'll get back to this because I think I have a question which is specifically about this, right? But for now, the question that I have right now is, in fact, it's not even a question, it's just an observation that it was the exact opposite for me. When you, for example, the question that I asked you about the material possessions and from a superficial standpoint, I think it was the exact opposite for me because I think the only thing I had access to with this absolutely gorgeous book were your thoughts, right? So I had absolutely no clue what Joseph looks like and what kind of belongings does he have, right? Just your thoughts. And I think that is the beautiful thing about books, isn't it? But I'm going to be completely candid and completely honest. I thought you were 50. I mean, I thought you're talking about such profound and complex ideas. I was assuming this guy must be old, right? And you actually talked about this earlier as well. You thought that reading would be somewhere, I'm sorry, writing would be something that would be reserved for you when you're around that age. But thankfully, that is not the case. But has it ever happened? Because I think at times I feel this, but has it ever happened that anyone who's known you before knowing your thoughts has perhaps underestimated you on the basis of your age?
most people that come across me are very surprised that I'm the age that I am, which is
Right,
24. Um, Almost everyone is quite surprised by that, especially people who are other authors or business people or anyone who's well accomplished. Even anyone who's quite spiritual as well, they're pretty surprised. Anyone that knows me before I wrote the book, they just see me as the person they knew before, so they don't care much.
right.
It's funny, most people who know me before I wrote the book, they never even read the book yet, even though it's been out for quite some time.
That's what happens. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. So it's so
yeah.
funny because I'm like, my family needs this the most, and almost no one's read it. And I think that was very hilarious. I was a little bit saddened by it, but I've come to the point where I'm like, yeah, it makes sense. Like, if someone wrote a book in my family, I don't know if I would read it either. Just because I don't know, their family, you know who they are. It's just like our
Right.
common biases.
Yeah, I mean, right, that makes sense. But has it ever happened that anyone else apart from the family, has it ever happened that you feel that this person is perhaps underestimating me just because I'm 24?
Oh,
I
someone
can offer more, right?
Yeah, I had a call with someone the other day. So I was working on growing my book and seeing if there's other avenues that I could take to bring it to more people. And I talked to this person that has been in the industry for over a decade or two, and he's helped a lot of self-published authors get their foot in the door and write their book, promote it, and reach to decent levels of success. And one of them, I think the most that anyone's ever sold was maybe like $60,000 in a year worth of books. And he was just telling me that his first impression of me was that, and this guy's also studies spirituality and does meditation almost daily. His first
Right.
reaction to me was, "Who is this guy? And why should I listen to this 24-year-old that knows nothing when I'm like 40 something, like I'm almost double his age? Why
Right.
why would I even pay attention to this? And so that was his first impression of me. And it's because he saw the picture and then saw the book and
Yeah.
then what he assumed.
Did it
And
bother you at all?
so
I'm
when
sorry, I
growing,
didn't mean to interrupt.
no, not at all. So
Yeah.
before growing up, that was probably something that very much irritated me, especially when my parents would specifically say, you don't understand this, especially if I'm talking about their marriage or love. They're like, you don't
Yeah.
understand this. You're too young. When you're older, you'll get it. And they still say that to me to this day, which is
Well,
so funny.
I have this question. Were they right at the time?
Were they, to me, no. To me,
All
no,
right,
because
fair.
I grew up counseling them through their marriage. Um,
Yeah.
and so they're just always saying, no, like it's different when you have a wife or whatever, when you have your significant other, you'll understand. When you're married, you'll understand. When you have kids, you'll understand. And it always gets
Yeah.
pushed back. When you have grandkids, then you
Yeah.
understand. And so that bothered me a lot just because I felt like I wasn't really being heard or seen. And I knew that some of the ideas I had were actually very valid, but they didn't want to listen to it just because they were preoccupied with their own problems. So yes, that did bother me a lot. Nowadays, that doesn't really bother me. It's I don't come across it as often anymore, and I think it's
Right.
because I'm not putting myself out there like that. We tend to attract what we put out there. So, for example, I could very easily position myself and say, I'm a 24-year-old, like firstborn over here in the US that has like a two-time international best-selling books that have sold over
Yeah.
60,000, like wildly successful and all that stuff. If I position myself as that, then I think I would get a lot more backlash because
Yeah. I mean,
I'm leading with that and saying, oh, like I'm so
right.
young and successful. And so people would naturally gravitate towards that. But also, there's going to be a lot of other people that hate that and resent it. Um, and so, but because my profile is very ambiguous and I don't really talk about me much. And if you notice in the book, on the back cover or in
There
the,
is nothing there. Yes,
there's
there's
nothing
nothing
there.
there.
You don't see a
Yep.
picture of me. You
That
don't
is why
see,
the 50-year-old image. That
yeah,
is the reason why. Yep.
yeah, exactly. So there's no bio of me in my book. You don't know anything about me other than
There
maybe
is
one
absolutely
paragraph.
nothing.
And that's it. And I did that very
Can I tell you a
intentionally
funny
because,
story about that though?
yeah. So you can
Like,
still
you
read it on
complete,
my
I'll tell you.
website. You can read it on my bio and on Amazon. There are places you can, but when someone picks up the book, I want the main focus to be them and the message and
Yeah.
what they can get from the book versus,
Right.
oh, how do I copy this guy or why is he so successful? So all the focus goes internal, and that's the whole purpose of it.
Right. Actually, before I picked up the book, I saw your video only talking about the book. I was like, this kid who's very impressed with this book is making this video, right? I had no clue you're the author, right? There's this YouTube video, YouTube short from your channel, right? And it is just talking about the book. And I was like, this dude is probably a fan, right? Who's talking about the book. But this is, I don't know, this is what I thought. And I was not able to associate it. This it was actually when I researched about you, then I was able to connect the dots that, okay, this was the dude. Right. So it
It's
is
so
funny that
funny.
you're not including any of that over here. But you're working on another project, aren't you?
Yeah, so I have
It's called,
multiple projects. So I actually just launched my second book, Beyond Thoughts, and that's not available in India yet in paperback. I mean, it could be, but it's exported.
it is.
Oh, it is?
Yeah,
Okay,
it
so that
is.
just
Yes, but it's pretty expensive. Yeah.
yeah, so I'm working with a publisher in India to get that down to around the same
Right.
pricing as the first book. So that's very
Hmm.
exciting. Hopefully within the next like month or two, then it'll be out
Yeah.
and available and then it can be picked up. I think it'll go really big over there. Interestingly, the book is selling I think 10 times more in 5 to 10 times more in India than it is in the US, which is so
Trust me
cool.
when I say this, it is everywhere. It is genuinely everywhere.
Is it really?
It really is everywhere. Everybody's talking about this.
Wow, that is, and I have no idea. I'm just sitting over here in my home, just in a suburb. And I have no idea
I
what's
got you.
going on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. But you're specifically working on this project of yours, the art of creating, aren't you? Can you
Yeah.
talk a little bit about that?
So the art of creating, so since the book sold so well. And then a lot of people have been reaching out to me and asking me how I wrote my book, what process do I have for writing, all of these things. How can they, um, for example, find themselves in writing? How can they find their own voice? How can they write from an authentic place? How can they heal through their writing? Um, how can they get over their fear of it? And so, because I've gotten so many questions like that, it just naturally pushed me in the direction of creating a course around my own personal process that I use for creating, how I view creating, how I view writing, how I do it. It's very, very different than what most people are taught, especially in school. It's almost the antithesis or opposite of it. And so I almost go against all rules. If you read my first book, the book is not structured like a normal book at all. It's significantly shorter. There's almost no nonfiction that's as short as that. And so, and it's very candid. And so because of that, I am very interested in being able to share my process with people. And it's not really a process where you're going to learn a lot. It's more of a course where you're going to unlearn all the things that are holding you back from just starting. Because I personally have never really written before the first book. I didn't even journal at all. And so the only thing I wrote were assignments that I had for school. That's it. I never
Right.
wrote for fun. I never really did anything like that. But most people assume that I've been writing for most of my life. That's not true. And so because of that, I think I have a very unique angle I can bring to people. And because of my lack of experience, I think it's very comforting for a lot of people and very liberating
And
to
it's
see that they don't
refreshing as well, isn't it?
need.
Yeah. I was saying it's refreshing as well, isn't it? It just feels, yeah, a
It,
person who just started writing it, it feels a nice point of view.
yeah, and the most common thing that people are saying after I explain or share my view on writing is that it's very, very invigorating and exciting, and they feel very free and that they can do
Right.
it. So it's very empowering. So that's why I'm creating it. And I think the more people can just create in general from that place of total freedom, no rules, no limitations, without thinking about other people or what they're going to think about your work, if it's good or bad, without any of that, we create some of the most amazing things. And so I battled with that a lot as I was writing my first book, because of course there's thoughts that come in or thinking that I was doing that said, I have no credibility. Why am I writing this? There's so many other people that wrote this same message before. Why would I need to do it? What's the point? And so I combated that quite a bit. And so I share some of my process in there and how I overcame that and what people can do to be able to let go of a lot of those negative, destructive thinking habits and then to create work that's really true to them.
That sounds fantastic. I'll be linking that in the bio, guys. So if you want to check it out, you can. And Joseph, can I ask you one thing? Are you able to hear the dogs?
The
Are they
dogs.
audible? Are they audible? Because there's some dogs barking over here, and it's actually 3 a.m. over here. I hope you're not able to hear them.
Oh, no, I don't think so. It might be really light, but yeah, I
You
don't.
would have known. Trust me, you would have known if you did. All right, G. So I
It,
think we're all all set. They're pretty loud. All right. So the question I was waiting to ask you wasn't that are you a stoic? If not, then what do you think about the philosophy? What do you think of this about the school? Because I think a lot of things you talk about, for example, if I lose all my possessions tomorrow, I'll be okay. That reminds me of the person who actually initiated stoicism, Zeno, right? And then you talk about, especially in the first chapter, that it is about perception and how we perceive things, right? Marcus Aurelius said, talked about these things. So are you a stoic or are you not? And if not, then what do you think about the school of thought and
yeah,
the school of
I
philosophy?
love Stoicism. I think it's probably one of the closest philosophies to what I'm talking about.
Right.
And yeah, I haven't studied it extensively, but I just know about it, and it's basically core philosophy, which is really about just thinking like worst case scenario and then being okay with it and really detaching yourself from just the worldly issues that most people are coming into contact with. So in regards to how Marcus Aurelius views life and things like that, it is very, very similar, if not the same. And so I truly admire his work and a lot of other Stoics as well. Modern day ones like Ryan Holiday, I think all of it
Yeah,
is very, very great. Um, yeah, I do love it, and I think I draw a lot from just the mindset that they have around life. The the other thing that I kind of got from it as well is they don't talk too much about the beauty of life. It's a little bit
right.
grim and a little bit dark, so I don't tend to stay in this stoic mind. And I noticed that when I was writing my book was, well, what do you do with your life after you stop thinking? Like it doesn't make any sense. Like where do you go? Do you just accept life as it is and it's inevitable? You're
Yeah,
gonna fall down, you're gonna get hurt, people are gonna backstab you, you're gonna go through these things. And so that is that all life is, just accepting all of this negativity. So that's where I stopped with, or that's where I found myself in terms of stoicism. It may not be like that, but I just found out that I lost a lot of that emotion when I went more and more into that practice of stoicism. So where I started to flip away from it a little bit more is the opposite side of it. And so that's when in the book I start talking about intuition and really following that instead, which is your soul, your highest calling, what feels expansive, unknown, and aligned with you. That's really what your intuition is. So that's the second half of the book. And I think that has more of a play in my life now than anything else, is just following that. So
right,
a lot less dark or morbid about constantly thinking about, right? Like memento mori is a huge core tenet of
right.
stoicism,
Yeah.
but I don't necessarily like to think about me dying all the time.
Obviously, yeah, understandable. Yes.
Yeah, I don't think anybody does. Of course, it's very good to remind yourself of that, but I don't think it's necessary to constantly do that. So for me, I always think about the other end of it, which is just maximizing what I'm doing in the present moment. How can I feel most alive right now? What would help me feel most expansive in the present moment? And following that, and that to me reminds me a lot more about how to bring more of myself, to be more present, and oddly enough, it does help me become more grateful too for all these things.
When you're actually talking about being more present, that when I read this in your book, the thing I remembered at the time was Marcus Aurelius because he's talking about some. It's like he's always talking about being in a hyper conscious state in the sense that you're able to feel everything that's happening around you. In the sense that even, for example, if he's walking through a field, he's feeling everything. And the closest thing I've ever felt in my life that has been when I'm hyper conscious. And I think what your book is kind of talking about, what I've been calling it, has been a constant hyper meditative state, right?
Mm,
Because I think that is what meditation is, right? So what usually happens is, for example, if I'm walking, so I'll very prominently feel that my weight is shifting from one leg to another, if that makes any sense,
yeah,
right? And that is what helps me not think, as
yeah,
per what you mentioned, right? So I think not just the dark parts, but I think even I just feel everything you've said has been consistent with Stoicism. So that is exactly why I was asking the question. Anyway, I want to talk to you about something else, though. The core idea of the book is that thinking is the root of all suffering, right? You want to talk to me about a little bit more about that? And because I have some follow-up questions, right?
yeah.
So, yeah,
So I'll explain the difference between thoughts and thinking, and that really is the core foundation of the whole entire book. So thoughts are inevitable, and thinking is unnecessary. Many people think that our thoughts create how we feel. That is only half true. So what actually creates our feelings? So thoughts come in and they're actually inherently neutral. It's just bits of information that we receive. For example, it's raining outside. That's a thought. Thinking is, why is it raining again? This is ruining my day. I have to go out and get groceries. This is terrible. This is the worst thing ever. I hate rain. That is thinking. And that is what
right,
causes our suffering. The initial thought of it's raining completely neutral. It's simply an observation. But anything after that, that is judging the actual thought that came in, that is what causes all of our suffering. And so another example is just if you ask someone to go hang out and they say no, the thought is, my friend said no to hanging out. Thinking would be, they must hate me. I'm not good enough.
Right.
Maybe they don't want to be my friend anymore. This is a terrible day. I'm never going to ask them ever again. That is all thinking. And that is what causes all of our suffering. So that's the difference between thoughts and thinking. Thoughts, you can't really control them. They come in and they go. Thinking, on the other hand, is when you think about the thoughts that you're having. That is what creates attachment. That is what creates uh, conditioning. That is what creates judgments and criticism. And that's what creates the duality of life and causes us to suffer. So that's really the core of the entire book. And so with that, you really understand how you can eliminate it by just letting go of your thinking and allowing thoughts to come in and go.
And but I have this question though, right? I in fact asked this question with practical example, right? Ever since this podcast was finalized, I have been constantly looking forward to this time, right? To be able to talk to you. Very frankly, I'm telling you that, right? And I've been thinking about it, and I've been feeling good about it. Is even looking forward to things, could that be a bad thing as well?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I actually wrote this about in my book too. So there's nothing wrong with thinking. Like it's not good or bad. It's just something that happens. There are many times that we can suffer from it, but there's also things that you can do that can help. So for example, thinking about good thoughts or bringing in and consciously trying to think about things that you're grateful for. So that's what positive thinking is or affirmations are. And that's not bad by any means. And if it's helpful to you, keep doing it. And so the only thing I would say about that is I noticed that as I tried to practice affirmations and becoming very, very present and constantly being grateful, right? Because people always say, if you're grateful, you're happy. I'm like, okay, let me just find everything I could possibly be grateful for. So every moment of my life, I'm like, oh, I'm grateful for this food. I'm grateful for this air. I'm grateful for being able to breathe. And so it just became this constant narration in my mind that I had to be
Right.
saying something to feel happy. And that became very, very exhausting. And whenever I would have something negative pop in, I would have to counter that with just positive thinking and saying, I'm good
Right.
enough, I'm confident, I'm brave, I can do this. So I just asked myself, do I want to keep talking to myself all day to be happy?
That
And
sounds like me though. But
yeah,
all right, go on.
and so
That
that
kind of sounds like me.
I just became insane. I couldn't, I was thinking so much that I could barely think anymore. It was just so exhausting. And I didn't want to try so hard to be happy anymore. And so I just asked myself, do I need to think in order to be happy? And so a question that can help break us out of that loop is, what emotion do you feel when you're not thinking?
It's absolutely nothing.
Nothing, or
There's peace.
it's just peace. Yeah, that's what it is.
Right.
And so you don't have to try to be peaceful. You don't have to try to be happy. You naturally are when you let go of your thinking. And if you think about the happiest moments in your life, you weren't how like what were you thinking at that time? What
This
was
thought
your mind?
experiment was fantastic. I just want to mention this. This thought experiment was actually fantastic. I've read this book about 10 days ago, right? And I've tried this on people. I'm not kidding, more than 10 times already, right? It is always working. But I just have this question though. Maybe perhaps is it because of the gravity? Because we're talking about the greatest moment of your life. Perhaps if we tone it down a little, just a random good moment of your life, perhaps then we'd be thinking about something. Do you reckon there is the question here is extreme, possibly?
It works either way, honestly. So if you're whenever you're happy, what are you thinking about? And people would maybe say my kids or like when I'm just going out and about. So I like to bring it to like when they're happiest. And that's where I like to do the experiment because I want them to be able to recreate that experience. And
Right.
they can't when they let go of their thinking. So I like to bring it there. And then also they might say, oh, I was thinking about how I am with my family and all this stuff. Okay, did you feel happy after you thought that thought or before you thought that thought, and then you realize that that was the moment.
Right.
And so people, the feeling always precedes the actual thought that you have. So that's how you know. And then the question again, my favorite question of all is just like, what emotion do you feel when you're not thinking? And that just cuts through everything. I've never had a person ever answer stressed or
Okay,
angry.
obviously, yeah. Right, right.
And
Nobody's
so
like that. Yeah.
that one question proves that we don't need to think in order to feel peace, love, joy, happiness, or anything positive. Um, and that's how I know it's our natural state. And so from that, that's the foundation of everything that I talk about. And it's so beautiful to finally have the root cause because I've spent just years trying to learn self-development, self-improvement, meditation, different spirituality, religions, and like all these different things. But like it was so confusing and so dense. And then some of them were saying you have to dedicate your entire life to this specific like yoga practice or this specific trade of spirituality. And it was just crazy. And I
Right.
was like, do I have to do these things to feel peace? Like, do I have to become a monk? And I was so relieved that when I came across this, that I could be relieved of those things and just let go of all the thinking that I was doing and just be happy and at peace now. And then I just decided to share it because it was so profound.
Right. And I want to talk about another thing though. You've mentioned in a couple of other interviews about this thing called divine download. What is a divine download, Joseph?
Yeah, so it depends who I'm talking to. I think it's so funny because I'm talking to a very, very scientific, pragmatic, very logical person. They will shut down as soon as I say universe, God, divine download, anything like that. But if anyone is slightly spiritual or on their healing journey, they love that language. So it depends who I'm talking to. And so to the very hyper logical person, I will just say that that is your intuition. And
Right.
usually that is a close enough word to what they understand that they can grasp the idea and run with it. To someone that is a little bit more spiritual, I can go a little bit deeper. So to them, I'll explain that divine download is quite literally just thoughts from the quantum field, thoughts from the universe, thoughts from anywhere else other than your own personal thinking. So that is where you get your insights from, your best ideas, your revelations, epiphanies. And if you really think about those things that come into your mind that completely change your life, how did that even happen? You didn't think of it. You weren't just sitting
Right.
there trying to summon it. It
Yeah.
just popped in your head one day when you fully surrendered, when you weren't thinking, it just came in and completely changed your life. And it only takes one thought to do that. And so anything that is just something that you could have never possibly thought of on your own, that would be a divine download or a thought from the universe or anything like that. And that's essentially your intuition. That is, it is beyond our own rational, logical thinking. And that's where creativity comes from. That's where all of our expansion comes from. That's where our soul essentially speaks to and through us.
Right. I am not a very spiritual person, right? So I'm going to contradict you on this a little bit, if you don't mind,
Hmm?
right? I just feel like you're kind of using this as a tool to be modest at times, right? I've seen your interviews, and I feel even if that's the case, even assuming there is such a thing called divine downloads, right? So I feel the thing you just downloaded, that was not really in public domain, that was sent to you, right? It belongs to you as well at some extent, if that makes any sense. I think you should take credit even for your epiphanies. Does that make sense to you? I think your epiphanies belong to you, there is a reason I didn't have them.
Yeah. So what I will say to that is that all of this is public domain, actually. It's just we're blocking ourselves from it. For example, I'll give you an example. All of the religions in the world, all of the spiritual teachings in the world, they all point to the same thing. All of them. They're all trying to help you achieve more peace, love, and joy in your life. Enlightenment, if you will. All of them. So how is it, if it's not public domain, that there's so many different religions and so many different people that are it's essentially experiencing the same thing, but not in the exact same way. So in that way, that's why I think it's all public domain, because I'm talking about the same thing that Buddha's talking about, that Jesus was talking about, that Gandhi was talking about, Martin Luther King, all of these spiritual teachers, we are all talking about the same exact thing. So is it really personal, or is it that we're all just tapping into the same source and it's coming through us, through our own lens and our own filter, because we are individual humans? And it might sound different, but it's really the same. For example, if you break down my vocal chords, like my actual voice, the words that I'm saying, what is
Right.
it mentally? My voice, if you break it down enough, even though I'm saying different words than you might use, it's the same vibration. Like all
Right.
voice are just vibrations. And
Correct.
so
Yeah.
vibration is the same thing that Gandhi had, the same thing that, Sadhguru has, that all these people. So
Right.
break it down enough, it's all the same. And we're all connected and we're all the same source. And so it just pops up differently. For example, another example would be like waves on an ocean. Each wave looks different, but it's all connected to the same source. So in
Right.
that, it's all public domain, but it just comes up differently.
All right. That makes sense. Although I think I have some points that I probably want to counter you with, but this is not a debate, right? This is just an interview. So
No,
I'm
I
gonna
love
leave it.
it's always
Uh,
very fun because I always invite those things because
uh,
it's always just brings more light to what the truth actually is.
do you want me to then?
I mean, yeah, it's always fun to explore it because
All right. So what?
do it the more because people probably have the same questions as you, and
Yeah.
so
All right.
it'd be good to bring it to light.
Right. So what I make of it is that you're talking about the same end goal, right? And that is just based off of what humans want. It's not really about it's not really something you actually think about. The end goal is peace, and that is just how humans function. But your ways are different. I've never read anywhere about this not thinking thing, right? I think as far as I know, you're the first person who's talking about this. Then there is some level of, your intellectual property, isn't it?
So there's
Because
a
you're talking about the same end goal.
Yeah, so there's a lot of people that talk about this. In the book, I actually quote a few people. So Shakespeare said, "Nothing is either good or bad in this world, but thinking makes it so." Same idea that I'm talking about. Um,
Right,
there's also, oh man, so a lot of other people too, especially meditation. When you're learning this, you're essentially learning non-thinking. Is you're noticing your
right,
thoughts,
correct.
you're
Yeah,
letting it pass. That's non-thinking. Non-thinking doesn't
right,
mean thoughts. It just means that you're not thinking about your thoughts that you're having. So it's literally the same thing. It's just I'm explaining it in a little bit of a different way to make it simpler for me personally to understand because I still didn't understand
right.
meditation. I'm like, how do I just observe my and thoughts and just detach? It doesn't make any sense.
So you
Um,
invented hyper meditation,
so
constant hyper meditation. Yeah, that's how it works, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
Dr. Joe Dispenza, familiar with him. I went to
I am.
retreat
Yeah,
for 7 days and we did walking meditations. So it was literally while we were awake. And so
right,
that essentially was non-thinking in the real world, practicing it as we were moving about. And so there are so many different ways that people have explained this, that I'm definitely not the first by any means. And I won't be the last just because we're really talking about the same thing.
right. Um, I hate to say this, right? I am a law student, right? But I think you won the debate, so we move on, right? You've mentioned in the book one of the most beautiful parts of the book, I'd say, is that where you're mentioning the goals, the two types of goals, right? The goals which come from inspiration versus the goals which come from desperation, right? Do you mind elucidating that a little bit more? And specifically, I want you to shed some light on the fact that once you've identified that this goal for me comes from inspiration, and this goal usually, for the most part, comes from desperation. How do we utilize that? Now that we have that knowledge, now that we're able to distinguish between the two, how do we utilize that? And is there a specific way to deal with a goal which comes from inspiration versus a goal which comes from desperation?
Yeah. So where a goal comes from will determine how we feel as we're pursuing that specific goal. So if you notice on the way to achieving a specific goal, you feel absolutely terrible, you don't feel aligned, you feel frustrated, a lot of fear, anxiety, most likely that's a goal of desperation. And that is because we're trying to get out of something, away from something, versus towards something that we really want in our lives. We're more concerned with running away than to actually run towards something that's meaningful to us. So a goal out of inspiration is created when this is essentially when you're able to let go of your own personal thinking. And this goal comes from a place of abundance where you're very, very excited about it and it feels expansive, unknown, and aligned with you. And it's not necessarily because you want that end goal so bad, but because you love doing whatever it is that will get you to that goal anyway. So, for example, for me, my inspirational goal was writing a book, but I loved writing the book throughout the process. And that's how I know I'm aligned with that specific goal. Versus if I was hating writing or not enjoying it or whatever it was, most likely that's a goal of desperation. Or if I had the goal of making a lot of money from this book, I wouldn't have enjoyed writing the book. And so a goal out of inspiration usually is not a means goal. It's not so that you can get something out of it. The mere
Right.
act of pursuing that inspirational goal is a goal in itself. That's that's what it is. There is
You're
no other.
enjoying the process as well. Yeah, I completely get it. I think when I read this part of the book, I was able to clearly identify that writing for me as well is a goal which comes from inspiration, right? And practically everything else is out of desperation, if I'm being
Yeah.
completely honest. Right. But the question here is, how do you utilize that? Now that I've created this distinction, right? And is there a possibility that perhaps a goal which is inspirational, we can put it into a different category, or is this just a natural thing? Could we do something about it?
Yeah. So once you've identified a goal from inspiration, that's probably the hardest part. Most people cannot identify what that is because they don't know what it feels like. But again, what you're meant to pursue in life is meant to feel expansive, unknown, and aligned. I repeat those concepts a lot just because it's very rare that people talk about it. Um, Expansive in one sense, it means that you feel like you're growing, you feel alive while you're doing it. Not everything you do
Right.
feels that way. Most of the things that we do in our lives feels very constraining, very heavy, and so we want to move away from those things. The second part is unknown. When you're pursuing a goal from inspiration, usually it's the unknown. It's uncharted territory. We don't really know what's going to
Right.
happen from it. For example, for me pursuing writing, I had no idea if I was going to be able to sell this book. I was really happy if I sold one. And so, because of that, it's the unknown. Every time we pursue that goal of inspiration, it's the unknown. We can't predict it. We don't know what it's going to be like. But working at our 9 to 5 job at a fast food restaurant where we're making minimum wage, that's very predictable. It's not unknown. We know what we're going to get every single time.
Right. Correct.
Stay miserable. So we sacrifice our own growth, expansion, and joy for just certainty, certainty of suffering, essentially. So once you identify this goal from inspiration, the best thing you can do is start to pursue it. Most people think that you have to drop everything and pursue it. That's not true. Just pursue it in any means and in any capacity that you can, even if it's just writing for 5, 10 minutes a day. That's all you have
Right.
to do. But the thing about your goal from inspiration is that it's really a goal from your own soul, from wherever. Like it just feels otherworldly. Um, and so when you do that for maybe 5, 10 minutes a day, like your whole day is way better than if you didn't do it. Even if it's such a
Right.
short time, you just feel so fulfilled. And it's because usually a goal from inspiration, you're creating something. We're born creators, not consumers. And so if we're consuming way more than we're creating, that's usually a sign of we're going to suffer a lot. But if
Yeah.
you just, again, one sentence, 5, 10 minutes a day, whatever it is, the day is so much better. For example, for me personally, when I create something, when I write a little bit, it doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be a page. It doesn't have to be just as small as humanly possible. I feel 10 times better that day than when I don't create anything at all. And so it doesn't even matter if I accomplish anything. It's just that I was able to write. And that to me is the most expansive thing that I can pursue in this moment. So that's what I would say when you identify your inspirational goal. Um, you don't even have to identify your inspirational goal, just identify something that feels expansive, unknown, and aligned to you. What do you feel like you can express yourself through? And just do that daily uh, for as tiny of amount you possibly can. And you're going to get addicted to that. You're going to want not just to do 5 minutes, but maybe 10 minutes, then not, maybe not 10, but 30. But the key is to start very small so that it's easy and manageable. And then you can grow from there. But that changed my life when I started using that and creating uh, that inspirational goal, no matter how small it was.
It's funny you talk about this, and then you're the person who wrote an international bestseller in 3 months. So I just feel like it's contradicting, isn't it? You're talking about uh, you had a lot of motivation back then, didn't you? Just right,
No,
right,
I
right.
didn't. So what's very interesting is that I was at my lowest point in my life when I started writing that book. Um,
Okay,
and I just was able to find some peace in my life. And I didn't know why, but I just felt compelled to write. I had no idea that I wanted to do it. I was more scared than anything else because I'd never really written before much other than school. And I didn't have any credentials or anything like that. So if I kept thinking about, I want to write a best-selling book, I want to sell 10,000 copies, I would never write the book. There's no way. There's just, it's just too big of a goal. It's too much. I constantly think I'm an imposter, feel like I'm not good enough. There's so much self-doubt. The only reason why I was able to write that book was because I didn't have those goals, which is very interesting. I let go of
right.
all attachment to external outcomes, and I wrote the book just because I wanted to write it. There's no other reason. And that's a goal from inspiration, where you love doing it so much and you're only doing it because you love doing it so much. That is how you truly know that it's your gift and your purpose, uh, because you do it for absolutely no reason at all.
Apart from the writing process, though, has the book actually helped you as a reader, even? Well, obviously, you're the writer, you're the author, but has
So
it
right,
helped you as a reader? Has it, sorry?
yeah, writing the book completely changed my life. I went from a inconsistent practitioner of what I wrote in the book to after I wrote it, it became me. Like it integrated into my life where it's second nature. And my thoughts became so clear and the principles that I shared became so concise and simple that I could explain it to anybody within a matter of minutes. Without writing it, it was impossible to explain. I didn't even know where to start. I didn't know why I was experiencing peace. I had no clue of anything. It was just swirling around in my head. But writing
Right.
it made things, it changed my life because of that. And I would recommend anybody who's like, who has achieved anything in their lives or made any progress to write the process down. And whatever you want to do repeatedly, just write about the process because you will never forget it if you write about it. Like not just writing like journaling. Freehand journaling is fine, but I find that I don't remember my journals. And
Right.
I don't think anybody does. But when you write with a specific intention to put it in a book or to teach someone, you never forget it. Never. And
Absolutely. Yeah.
so that's what I recommend. Even if you never think you're going to publish the book, even if you never think you're going to teach it to anyone, but like for you personally, if you want to remember something or how you did something or how can you repeat that process in your life, I highly recommend writing out a process and exactly how you did it and why. And that's essentially what my book was. I wrote out a process for myself to remember how I got there, what it is, how I can remember it, the step-by-step tutorial essentially on finding peace. And that has been so amazing.
No, I mean, I'll be completely honest. The book helped me a lot as well. It is funny. I've just read this. It's just about 10 days, but it is helping me. Trust me. in the sense that I'm able to feel that there is something different, right? And I won't go ahead and say that it exaggerated to the point that it has changed everything, but
Oh
it's
yeah.
helping. I think if you're, I think this is something Ryan Holiday has said, that if you're buying a book, right, and if it's like, I don't know, right, for example, for us, it's like 300 rupees. If you, even if you're getting one life-changing idea out of it, I think it's worth it, isn't it? So
Oh,
yeah,
price.
that's, sorry.
Yeah, it's absolutely priceless. You can't
Exactly.
put a price on peace.
So it's actually been really helpful for me, to me, reading this one. But unfortunately, I haven't had the opportunity of reading Beyond Thoughts, though. Do you want to talk a little bit about it? Let us know what exactly is it about. It's a poetry compilation, as far as I know.
Yes.
Is there a specific topic, or is there a theme?
So the themes is going to coincide with my first book. So it's a lot about the human condition, our own thoughts and our own thinking, where suffering comes from. I go into a little bit more detail and a depiction of why we suffer so much. So there's a lot of, I would say, nuance in thinking. And so I start to dive into that. So I'll certain poems, I'll dive into judgment and what that does to us. And there's other poems that I'll write about thinking, and then I'll write about intuition, and then I'll write about uh, just observations that I've had. And so, and just about relationships and how we talk to each other. So it's a very diverse range of experiences that I've just noticed, but it's through the lens of my first book. So it's very, very short. Each poem is like no more than a few sentences long, or sometimes it's one line. Um, but it cuts through really, really deep. And I enjoy that. So if you read that book, you'll basically be put in a non-thinking state. It'll jumble your thinking up and cause you to question a lot of things that we assume that cause us a lot of suffering. So
It'll seem as if I'm repeating myself, but you know what it reminds me of? It reminded me of Meditations by Marcus Aurelius, if I'm being completely honest. I think that would be the closest thing I could explain. Because I have read a lot of it on your Instagram profile as well, right? You've posted a
yes,
lot of content from Beyond Thoughts, right? And by the way, his Instagram handle is it's Joseph Nguyen, right?
yeah,
You guys can follow him, and I'll obviously link everything down below, so that will be there, right? But I've had the opportunity of reading it. I think it is absolutely fantastic. Once you are done with the deal, when whatever it is, when it comes to India, I think it's going to blow up as well, hopefully,
yeah.
right? Now, tell me, how were you introduced to poetry specifically, and why poetry, and what kind of poetry do you usually read, and what kind of poetry are you writing and stuff?
Yeah, I don't read poetry.
At all?
I didn't even write poetry until a couple months ago. And at all.
All
And
right.
I would, yeah. So I wouldn't even consider, again, I didn't even know what I was writing was poetry until I randomly came across this book called Clarity and Connection by Young Pueblo. And I saw that he was writing little excerpts and putting it into a book. And it would be a couple lines long or like a paragraph long. And there's no punctuation other than periods, but there was no capitalization or anything like that. And it just looked like he was dumping his thoughts onto the page. And I found that so fascinating because it broke all the traditional ways of writing poetry that I thought had to be it. I thought poetry had to rhyme. I thought poetry had to have a deep meaning or like be very descriptive or use
Right.
language in other ways that you wouldn't normally. But once I saw that anything could be poetry, I decided to just put out a poetry book. And I was tweeting almost daily for about 5 or 6 months, just very short thoughts, like almost one sentence thoughts from
Right.
my. And once I looked back 5 months, I realized that I had written 90% of this poetry collection on Twitter. So all I did was I just compiled most of this stuff. And some of the things I wrote a little bit more, but for the most part, most of the poems were already written. And
Right.
that amazing to me. And so, yeah, I've never written poetry before. 6, 7 months ago, I don't even read poetry. I still don't read poetry. Uh, and
I don't know how to comment on that, to be honest. I'm kind of offended, but all right, go on.
I don't have
I'm just messing with
I seriously don't,
you.
because it doesn't make sense in any way that I was able to do that. Um, all I can say that it just came from non-thinking. And when I'm put in that state, I just write what I feel, I write what comes through, and I do my best to get out of the way. And that is how the book was written. And that's how my first book was written, even though I've never really written before either. So I think I'm just paving a way for giving people permission to just do what they want without needing anything. Like, you don't even need to
Right.
read poetry to write poetry. You don't even need to have.
But that is actually the case. If I'm being, again, if I'm being honest, that is actually the case. Poetry, the best part about poetry is it's very liberating, right? There is no format. If you're talking about specific poetry, if you're talking about haiku, reverse, whatever it is, then there are obviously formats. But in general, there is no format when it comes to poetry. Right? That is what makes it the best, doesn't it? But I mean, yeah, I mentioned earlier that I posted a story on Instagram asking my followers if there's any question they want to ask you. So we're on to that section now. I hope we have a transition or something.
Yeah,
But all right. So should we just start?
yeah, I'm excited.
All right. So the first thing is Nithi Lahoti is asking, what is the purpose of your life?
The purpose of my life. This question's a funny one. I started writing a children's book.
You
I
did.
write children's books, by the way. But I started writing a children's book because I thought a lot of these concepts would really, if someone read it when they were like 4 years old, that they would basically become Buddha by the time they're like 10. Um, but one of the questions that I had in the actual book was the the actual children's book is between like a parent animal and like a child animal, and the child animal asks the parent, like, what's the purpose of life? And in that book, I wrote as the parent and responded to the child, if you're thinking about it, you're missing it.
Hmm. Right.
That is my answer to that specific question.
So if you're thinking about your purpose, well,
You're missing it.
I'll have to think about it. I have to think about it. You are a poet.
Yeah.
You
What I'll embellish a little bit more. But what I mean by that is if we're constantly thinking about our purpose, we're not living it. We're too busy thinking about it. And so
right.
our purpose is exactly what's in front of us right here, right now. It's what's in the present moment. And if we're thinking about how we're washing the dishes, but we're supposed to be like out there helping the homeless, we're missing the point. Your purpose is not only helping those people out there, it's also what you're doing right here, right now. And if we're in a relationship with a significant other and we're trying to enjoy the day, but we're constantly thinking about, I need to go like change the world, you're missing what's right in front of you, which is your significant other, which is extremely important. And so that's why I say, if you're thinking about your purpose, you're missing it. It's right in front of you. There's a lot of proverbs that speak about that, but to me, that's
Right.
what is just being completely present with what's right in front of you right now.
Right. I think the funny thing about this question is I have no clue what my answer is. Uh,
Hey, mine either.
Earlier, I used to say I just feel like now I've realized this is what hedonism is. I used to say life is nothing but just ethical dopamine, just search for ethical dopamine because that was my answer, and I don't know that now. I have no clue what my answer is, but yeah, I just feel like I don't know. Whatever it is, I hope I'm fulfilling it. So next question. This is by Park Singh. Isn't the process of thinking necessary for eternal peace? That is, when a problem creeps up on us, isn't thinking what leads to a peaceful outcome?
So if you're not thinking about your problem, does it exist?
Objectively, I'd say it does.
Well, for example, let's say if our problem is that we dislike, most of our problems come from judgments on a specific uh, neutral circumstance. Like, for example, it
Right,
could be raining, but our problem is that we hate the rain. The rain becomes a problem for
right,
us because we hate it.
right.
Same thing with other people. If we don't like a person or if we're jealous of them, it's not the other person that is causing the problem. It's our own judgment of that person, which is causing the problem.
Absolutely, right.
But if we're not thinking about how we hate that person, do we hate that person?
That's a good question. I think this reminds me of this. There's this quote which says, what was it? We suffer more in imagination than reality.
That's
I think
correct.
this is what it is. This is also, by the way, a Stoic quote. With
Yes. I think that's
I think this is by Epictetus. But I think perhaps what is the problem, the trouble that we're having is a lot more, let's say, physical trouble, in the sense that somebody is coming and they're gonna beat me. Then what?
yeah, I'd be concerned if that's like a daily problem.
Absolutely. I'm not here to claim that that happens daily.
But
But still, if we're talking about that kind of problem, right, then how do you deal with it?
more than likely, if someone's breaking into your home and about to kill you, you're not thinking. You're acting. There's no time
You're
to
right.
about anything at all other than getting out or completely incapacitating the other person so you can escape. But in that moment,
Right.
you're protecting yourself and your family, which wouldn't require thinking anyway. But what's interesting is that we suffer more from being worried about someone breaking in than when someone actually breaks in.
Absolutely, absolutely. That is definitely the case. As a person who's very skeptical in nature, I definitely agree to that. I am an absolute pessimist, man.
Yeah.
So it's pretty sad. Yeah.
So that's what I would say is like obviously there's things like that that pop up, but more than likely the thing that we think is the biggest problem in our lives are not survival based, where we're going to die if this thing is not solved immediately. Um, so to that, I'll say that's why thinking is not necessary. And what's even crazier to even think about or not think about is your heart keeps you alive, but how much do you have to think about it to beat your own heart or to breathe? There's so much of life that you don't even have to think about, but it's there for you and taking care of you. And it doesn't require any effort on our end. That's what you want to lean into.
Right. In the modern society, definitely that's the case. But we're just wired in the primal manner, aren't we? It is this is how our mind works. But yeah, you're absolutely right when you say that. Absolutely. So the last question here is that what can we expect from Joseph in the future?
I couldn't
This
even
is
tell
by Shubhangi Trivedi.
I couldn't even tell
I
you all I
forgot
can
to say
tell you is
that.
the next step. So my next step is this next course, so the art of creating, which I'm very, very excited about because hopefully there's more people that write or create art or do something creative. So that's really my hope for the course is to really liberate a lot of people from their own limiting beliefs about creating anything in their life. And so that's what you can expect from me. I think more courses down the road too. So I'm going to create a course off of the first book just to go deeper on some of the topics. And for now, that's really what I see in the future. I think I will probably write a children's book within the next year or so, but that's
Right.
yeah, I'm going all over the place. So like a nonfiction book, a poem book, children's book. There's so many things that I never thought I would ever do, but seems fun, and now I'm gonna do it because I'm not gonna think about it.
Right. I think it's just funny at times when you say, I'm just not going to think about it because you've written a whole book about it, which is remarkable. But yeah, so now this is the final last question, right, of the whole podcast slash interview, whatever you want to call it, right? And this is not from anyone else, this is from me, and I really want to know this. So when are you coming to India then? Because you mentioned that there are a lot of sort sales happening over here, right? You clearly have a lot of fans over here, and I can be a proof of that, right? A witness of that. I don't know. But so what's the plan?
I would love to go to India. I think I've only left this country twice, and it was only to Canada, which was very close. And then the other was just to Mexico, which was also very close. So
Right.
I've never been to Europe or that side of the world, but I would love to be able to go out maybe within the next year. My publisher there, I think Manjul is their name. I feel like they'll want me to do something over there. Um, the book, I don't really know the magnitude of the book over there, but I also
Right.
have no idea how to get over there and have an event of some sort. But it would be
Dude,
so
it is
cool.
gonna be fantastic. Yep, it is gonna be so cool.
Yeah, so that's
I
the plan
mean,
within the next year. It'd be really cool to have some sort of workshop type of thing.
yeah, right.
I'll talk for a bit, then people can talk with amongst themselves, ask questions, and then I can be able to answer anything that comes up for them. Maybe even do a few exercises there. But I think it'd be really cool, and we can have a lot of fun just because people over there seem to be a lot more spiritual than over here. So that'd be amazing to kind of be a part of that.
I'm not entirely sure about that, to be honest, when we talk about the spiritual part, because I don't know. I just feel like Western people are a little bit more spiritual these days, genuinely. I think I'd say there's a difference between being spiritual and being religious, right? I think
Gotcha.
you would agree as well,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So that is what the difference is over here, right? I know a lot of people who are actually spiritual and truly spiritual. In fact, as a matter of fact, I don't know if it's about it, but I'm going to read. You mentioned Dr. Joe Dispenza, right? I'm
Mm.
about to read his book. What was it? What was it called?
There's a lot
Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself.
of it. Yeah.
The famous one. Yeah. So I don't know. Maybe I'll get introduced to that as well. But yeah, right. There are a lot of religious people here, though. That is definitely the case.
Yeah.
But anyway, is there anything? No, the last thing actually I want to ask you, I'm just gonna ask you one more thing. I feel you've not been writing for a long time, but you've been a reader, correct?
Um, Not much either. Um, so
That's a very surprising thing to know.
yeah, I actually hate reading books. And even though
Because
so I'll tell
yeah,
you,
right.
I've probably read cover to cover, oh, probably two or three of those books.
We're gonna cut this part out, bro. This is gonna
And
look really bad.
oh no, keep it in. This is like completely honest. And
We're just messing with you.
oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's it's mind blowing because yeah, I thought you had to be a very avid reader to be a good writer. Uh, I don't know if that's actually true or not. I'm sure it helps, but it's not an
I
absolute.
mean, the point is, I think you've proven it, haven't you? Because you are a good writer, right? And then you've not read a lot. So it's you just have an answer to that. You don't really need to think about it, which you should not do in the first place. So it's fine. It's fine. Don't think.
Yeah, and what's funny is this is only maybe a third of all the books in this house, and so I
Who reads?
buy who reads?
Yeah.
Nobody.
How does that make sense? Why do you buy books then?
You ask a lot of your friends or anyone that you know. There's so many people that buy books and just never get the chance to read them. I think I get a dopamine hit, like you were saying, by just like buying a book. I'm like, oh man, this is gonna be awesome, and then I just never get around to doing
Uh,
it. Um,
right. I get it. I have this library as well. My percentage is usually around 60%
oh, that's
and
pretty.
60% read and 40% not read.
That's
But
a,
there are a lot of children's books there as well. So, I mean, I don't know if you want to count them or not, but yeah,
yeah. You're probably a way better writer than me then, if that's a sixty
I
percentile.
won't say so. I won't say so. This, like I said, this is an absolute beauty, bro. What are you talking about?
But yes,
Mind blown.
I don't read. I probably read. I didn't read growing up either. I only read literally what was the required books from school, which was maybe one a year or every couple of years. And
Right.
then after that, I started reading more after once I entered adolescence. And I've probably read probably less than like 20 books in my entire life. I don't I think that's a stretch too. Like I'm trying to be conservative, but I think that's a bit of a stretch. So no, I don't really read.
But again, I think you're a perfect example of it doesn't really matter, kind of, right?
I, it does not matter at all. I think there's so many excuses that we make for why we can't do something in life. And so I just do my best to really remove all of those things that I think I need to do in order to do what I want with my life. And I've come to almost dislike a lot of books, most books in that case, most information, just because
Right.
the way books work is that you actually have to use a lot of fluff. Um, what I realized was most books could be easily summarized into a few pages, but traditional publishers want you to have a central thesis and then
Right.
supporting arguments, counter arguments, and then stories and evidence and case studies. And that's what
Right.
blows the book. And so there's books that are 250 pages that are so unnecessary. And I just really dislike just unnecessary things. That's why I love
I
poetry.
get
Is
it.
is the elimination of it.
Right. Yeah. But it's not necessary. If you're reading, for example, a non-fiction book, it's not necessary to read it cover to cover,
Oh
right?
yeah.
And yeah, you just read what you want to read. And in fact, I think there was this quote by Naval Ravikant, right? He mentioned that you just read what you love till the time you fall in love with reading, something like this.
Yeah.
Okay, initially just read, you can read bullshit, right? And then when you actually like reading, you can, graduate to a better level. But I get your point as well, though, and I think you're the live example of how it's not really that important, apparently. So, yeah, I think that's great. I think what goes for you, from my point of view, is that you write, right? I think, yeah, I think that's also very important because there's this concept of functional illiteracy, right? If you know how to read, if you know how to write, and if you're not doing anything with it at all, and I'm not saying nonfiction, I'm talking about articles as well. I'm sure you read articles and stuff, right? So if you're not doing anything with it, if you're not writing, if you're not reading, so you're functionally illiterate. And again, this is not particularly a word which is a bad thing. I guess it's a completely fine place to be in life, but I just hate it. I just feel like I don't want to be functionally illiterate. I was offended. I was like, I'm not functionally illiterate. I was like, yeah, I'm gonna read more. And I was thankfully I read and I was able to discover you. So
Yeah.
worked out
I'm
well.
glad too. And so yeah,
Thank you
it's
so much for doing this, dude. Thank you so much for coming on. Thank you so much for taking the time out. Is there anything you'd like to say at the end?
well, I just wanted to thank you too. I know it's crazy late over there. I didn't think it was like middle of the night, like 3, 4 a.m. for you.
Yep, it is full.
So yeah, I really want to thank you for that because you definitely didn't have to do that at all. But I had
Bro, it is worth it. It is so worth it. Trust me.
yeah, I had a lot of fun on this call, and I appreciate you asking the questions that you actually wanted to ask, and then truly questioning everything and what I was saying. And well, most podcast hosts don't do that because they're afraid of whatever, like arguing or confrontation or whatever it is. But I actually enjoy it a lot because it's real. It's what you're thinking. It's what other people are thinking. And so no, there's no right or wrong. It's just take what you will and what helps and leave what doesn't. And so I think that leads to a much more fruitful conversation and going much deeper than anything else. So yeah, I just wanted to thank you for that.
Right. Nee, thank you so much for coming on, man. And like I said, even initially, that it's just going to be a conversation. We're not really it's not really going to be an interview. It's just going to be a conversation. And I hope that is exactly what it was. And that's pretty much it then. So we'll just do 3, 2, 1 and cut. Hey guys, thank you so much for sticking around till the end. It really means a lot. And I had a lot of fun talking to Joseph. It was an absolute pleasure. If you're into more of such content, feel free to subscribe to the channel. And I guess I'll see you in the next episode.